During the next 2 decades, we will collectively experience a century's worth of technological innovation. Literally. Most of us are familiar with the impact that technology is having on our lives, but what we're not aware of is that this change and the pace of change is accelerating exponentially. And this will have a huge impact on the way our world works, on how our lives work. I spend my professional time helping organizational leaders figure out what these changes mean, how it will affect their markets, how it will affect their strategies, how it will affect their customer relationships. Simply, I'm often asking the question, what will the future look like, and how do we prepare for it? And while I do that a decent amount as a professional, I also do that through a different lens, because these 3 little guys are my sons. And when I think about the change that we're about to embark on over the next couple of decades, I ask myself, how will I prepare them? How will we collectively prepare the youth for today for a world that we can't quite imagine or comprehend yet? If I were to ask you what made the biggest impact in your life as a child, I'm guessing that most of you would not come back and say it was some teacher writing on the whiteboard and you remember that. I'm guessing that most of you would come back with some special, unique experience that changed your life, that gave you such emotion that you remembered that forever. And the reason why that happens is because experiences become part of us. They become the bedrock from which we make our own decisions. And that's certainly true in my own life. If I look at the majority of the experiences that shaped who I am today, that shape my framework, how I make decisions, how I process the world, I could group them into 2 relatively large buckets. The first one being team sports, the second one being adventure travel. I had the privilege to play sports as a kid and through high school. I even played in college, which is a blessing. I've had a chance to coach at multiple amateur levels as well. And then adventure travel, I believe travel is the greatest educator we have the opportunity to engage with. What I'd like to do today is to just tell you a couple of stories about why I believe that team sports and adventure travel seemingly, and maybe surprisingly, can help prepare our kids for a fast-moving digital future. A couple of months ago, I got to be part of something special. You see, it was Little League playoff time, and I was a Little League coach. And we had 5 teams in our league, so there was only room for 4 teams in the playoffs. But instead of excluding team number 5, we at least gave them a chance. So team 5 played team number 4 for a chance to be in the playoffs. Now team 5, the last place team, they had a tough year. Out of 16 games, they only won 4 games. And so most people thought, well, those guys will be done, and their parents were already making plans for after the season, and so on and so forth. But surprisingly, they actually won. So that put them in the playoffs, which was great. The only downside to that story was they were playing the first-place team. The first-place team that had won 14 out of 16 games. And they'd lost by a cumulative total of 2 runs. In fact, these 2 teams had played 6 days before the previous game, and the first-place team had beaten the last-place team 21-5. Remarkably, the last-place team won. And they went on to win 5 of 6 games to put themselves in the championship game. Now, my team was playing them. I was coaching the team that was playing them. And I began to feel a little bit uncomfortable when all the other coaches and all the other dads and all the other players were saying, man, you got this. Because we had already beaten them once in the playoffs. And in order for them to win the championship, they had to beat us twice. We only had to beat them once. I got a bit more uncomfortable when they did beat us once. And I got a little bit more uncomfortable when, in the bottom of the last inning of the second championship game, we were down by 6 runs. I looked at my players and I said, guys, we're in a great spot. They looked at me like I was crazy, and I probably was. And I just told them, I said, guys, one at a time, we just need to get on base. Go up there, have fun, give it your best, and one by one, we're going to get on base. We're going to go around, and we're going to score. And one by one, we're going to do that, and we're going to win. So the first batter went up, and he struck out. And the second batter went up, and he struck out. And now they were looking at me like I was totally crazy. And you could feel the energy on the field. The other team was about to do the impossible. Now, the next kid up was my son. Pretty decent baseball player. And he uncharacteristically swung at two really, really bad balls. The count was 1-2. We were one strike away from our season being done. The last place team was one strike away from doing the impossible. But my son somehow got a walk out of it. The kids that followed him, a hit, a walk, a hit, a hit. And pretty soon we were kind of looking around, the coaches going like, maybe this will happen. So we had scored 3 runs. Bases were loaded, and up came Max. Max had some talent, but there were lots of times during the season where Max didn't necessarily engage. He wasn't always there. Max was there this time. He crushed the ball to the wall. It scored 3 runs. The crowd was going crazy. We had tied up the game, and Max was held up at third. Now it was Luke's turn. Luke was a great kid, a quiet kid. And quite frankly, he struggled early in the season at the plate. And in the field, he got his tooth knocked out with a chip. So here he was. What was interesting about Luke is over the last couple of games, he had begun to hit and gain a little bit of confidence. Let's see what happened.
Get up on the ground. Maxwell, get up. Plays it home right here. Plays it home. Ground ball.
Such is the magic of youth sports. And such is the magic of life. Sports are a great metaphor. If you think about the lessons learned by those kids, the kids on both teams, quite frankly, the kids on my team, as soon as we did get a couple guys on base, they began to believe, they began to encourage each other, they began that they could overcome the odds. The kids on the other team were faced with failure, and you could feel the momentum switch. Sports teaches a ton of great lessons. The keys being effort and attitude and perseverance, leadership, teamwork. The great thing about sports, quite frankly, is kids fail a lot. And they're asked, sometimes explicitly, but often implicitly, how will you respond? Will you get back up? Will you quit? Will you blame somebody else? Great life lessons. And maybe because of those benefits, and maybe because kids are forced to overcome those things, there's a lot of data points that says kids who play youth sports have greater academic achievement, greater confidence, stronger relationships. They participate generally in less risky behavior. As adults, they participate more in they have higher community involvement and higher income. How many of your kids play youth sports? Awesome. Most of them are not going to be pros. Out of every 1,000 high school players, only 1, 2, or 3 ultimately become a professional player. But yet what I see is a lot of parents treating their little Johnnies like they're professional athletes. They spend year-round, they spend hours and hours, they have private coaches and private trainers. And not that those are bad, and I'm not judging them, because some of those kids will go pro, and some of those kids can handle it. But generally speaking, we're seeing increased rates of burnout, increased rates of injuries, because kids don't take seasons off anymore. They're forced to specialize early, and they lose out on the experience of playing other sports and learning new things, both mentally and athletically. They also miss out on other experiences. I don't know about you, but some of my best experiences of my life came as a result of adventure and travel. Backpacking in Yosemite with my dad, kayaking in Alaska, going to the World's Fair in Vancouver, BC. And these early childhood experiences created in me and birthed in me a love for travel. And since that time, I've had the chance to go to over 40 different countries on 6 continents. I've spent a cumulative total of about 28 months outside the country. And travel is the best educator. And in fact, travel reduces us all to a kindergartner again. Everything is brand new. The things we thought we knew and we took for granted, we have to learn them all again. new language, new culture, new landscape, new currency. If you think you know how to go to the bathroom, go to Asia and figure out if you know that still. My wife and I were in Nepal several years ago. Nepal borders India and Tibet. We were going on a trek up to Annapurna Base Camp, just under 14,000 feet. And the trek was amazing. As you might expect, the scenery was beautiful. You can see we made a custom basket. And this is how the Nepalis carry it on their head. This is called a doko. The people were so amazed that we were on Nepalese television when we got back to Kathmandu. We're holding hands here with some kids walking home from school. Amazing. They walked several thousand vertical feet to school every day. We didn't talk their language, but we held hands and we smiled and we said namaste. But one of the most unique experiences about that trek was about day 4. We were in our guest house getting ready for bed, and all of a sudden a guy walks in with a big old machine gun. And we did what you did, but we didn't laugh quite as loud. And what ultimately happened after some yelling and shouting and some dialogue is that we found out that this guy was a Maoist. Now, we didn't know much about Maoists. We had heard about them. We had seen that they had blown up some cars a day or two before the trek. We had seen that they left us some really nice and kind and inviting art on our trek. You see, Nepal at the time was in a state of civil war. Basically, the king was in charge of the 2 largest cities, and the Maoists had control of the rest of the country. And so this gentleman with a machine gun was asking for money. Well, after I kind of gathered myself and I asked our guide, I said, well, how much money are we talking about here? And he said, well, around $20 US is normally the going rate, except if you're an American. If you're an American, it's about $100 a head. And the reason why this was is because the US government had recently labeled the Maoists a terrorist organization. So I thought about this for a second, and I gave Krishna, our guide, $50. And I said, Krishna, figure out whatever story you want to tell him, pay him however much you want to tell him, as long as you keep us safe. Whatever's left over, you get to keep. Krishna ultimately ended up telling the guy we were Canadian, working for an NGO. Thank you, Canada. He paid him about $30, and he got to keep 20, which, for context, that was about 2 days' wages for him, which I was glad, and I was excited, and that was fantastic. The funniest part of that story, though, by the way, is that after we had paid the money, he whipped out some paper, wrote on them, and through a translator said, if you run into any of my brothers, let them know you already support our cause. The terrorist gave us a receipt. I have dozens of stories like this, and what I've learned is that we're continually put into foreign environments with undeveloped skills and uncertain outcomes. And really, when we talk about an exponential path to the future, large amount of connectivity and uncertainty, this is what our kids will face. And this is an exact metaphor for what they'll have to overcome. Angela Duckworth and several others have done research to try and figure out what is it that separates people from succeeding or not. Given the same amount of natural talent and intelligence, why do some people do well and some people do not so well? And what they found is it all boils down to these 3 points. Those that succeed in life have a lot of curiosity. They're interested in learning more about the world. They've got grit, which basically means they're not afraid to fail, and when they do fail, they learn from it and they get back up again, and they tenaciously pursue long-term goals. And they've got character. And it's these 3 character traits that help people succeed in life. And if I think about the path of exponential technology and the disruption that will evoke on the world, it'll open up all kinds of amazing things. But it'll also disrupt everything that we take for granted about our lives. And so our kids, undoubtedly, 10 or 20 years from now, and they're already facing this stuff, but at an increasing pace, they will face foreign environments and with undeveloped skills with uncertain outcomes. And it's our job. It's my job to teach my boys, and it's our job collectively to raise up the next generation of leaders, to learn how to understand and adapt to foreign environments. Foreign environments are going to be normal and natural for them. And they're going to have to participate and try and contribute with undeveloped skills. They're going to have to learn. They're going to have to not be afraid to fail. They're going to have to create. They're going to have to try it out and figure it out along the way. They're going to have to learn how to overcome these failures to increase their chance of success. So when I look at a future really shaped by the exponential growth of technology. I see great opportunity for deep, rich analog experiences of adventure travel and team sports to help shape the wonder and the curiosity and the grit and the tenacity and the character that these kids will need to succeed. I believe if we collectively do this together, these kids will be solving problems we didn't even know to ask. They will be creating solutions that we didn't even think were possible. Thank you for your time.